February. So we've been watching this very, very closely. And as the government and as things have evolved, so has Austal evolved in our response and what we're doing to prepare the workforce. We work closely or follow closely the guidelines from the government and from the CDC. Early on, we were focused on limiting travel. We did that way early on when the U.S. was doing it overall. And then we've also looked at the CDC guidelines and OSHA guidelines for each workplace. So what we've done is we've implemented, for example, this is not everything, but we've implemented enhanced cleaning. So we've doubled our cleaning workforce to clean all public areas constantly and consistently throughout the day, every day, 7 days a week. We also use actually special cleaning supplies that actually put a coating on the material that it's cleaning so that it actually continuously adds protection during the course of the day. We've actually implemented lots of hand sanitizer stations throughout the facility. And some of that is even, I'll call it enhanced hand sanitizer that actually puts a protective coating on your hands that lasts for 24 hours unless you wash it off with soap and water. We've implemented enhanced leave policies so that our employees can have some flexibility in how they handle the school closures and other situations that they might have on an individual basis. And we've also done a lot within the workforce. So most of our work that we do here is actually spread out, and that it does support social distancing for the most part. But there's no doubt that when you build ships, there are also challenges as well. So in those challenged areas where social distancing is more difficult, we actually have enhanced PPE policies per the CDC that we've implemented here as well. Enhanced PPE could be a face shield, which a lot of folks typically use anyways when they're doing their work in shipbuilding, or face masks, face coverings, clear or some sort of barrier between them and somebody else. And those procedures are also in place and have been in place for quite a while. One of the other things that we feel is also very, very important is communicating with our employees constantly and consistently. And we do that basically every other day. So what we'll do is we'll implement or we'll communicate new procedures that we've implemented or have in place as things have evolved, or we'll communicate reminders for social distancing, CDC recommendations, both for in the workplace and at home, and any other important communications that we have. We have actually a text system that we use to communicate it out. And those are things that I put out myself with my signature on, so we're very close to how we're communicating with our employees. I also have a Tiger team. That's all we're doing is focused on how we respond to the pandemic. That team actually meets daily, 7 days a week. And what we do is we go through all of the facilities that we have, both here and elsewhere. We communicate any activity that's happening, any concerns that we have, and any changes or improvements that we need to make, or anything that we need to do to address any issues that we may have. We do that daily, 7 days a week. With regards to the 2 cases that we've actually had, one of the things there's a few things that we do in that case. We actually have a formal response plan. And the first thing that we do is we make sure we understand and we confirm the actual case itself. And then we get as much information as we can from the employee who actually did test positive. Then we go through a rigorous process of identifying, per the CDC recommendations, who worked within close contact with that particular individual. Once we go through the process of validating that, we will then actually talk to the employees and confirm our findings, and then we'll go ahead and send them home and quarantine them for the length necessary as per CDC requirements. The other thing that we do, which is obviously very, very important, is we communicate it to our employees. So we've had 2 instances that have happened. Within that day that we find out, we communicate exactly what we can communicate for what's legally allowed for us to communicate. And we give as much information as we possibly can so that our employees fully understand what we're dealing with and how we're dealing with it, so that they can understand that and be comfortable with the company's response. So all in all, I think we've been monitoring CDC, and we've been implementing procedures, and I think things have been going reasonably well. There's 2 other things I'll mention. One is I did talk to Dr. Austal last week to communicate to him what we were doing here in the facility so that he understood it and he was comfortable with it. I'm not going to speak for him, but he did he was very comfortable with what we communicated, so it was very well received. And the other thing is that I am also talking twice weekly with the Secretary of the Navy's office, along with the 4 other major shipbuilders across the country. And what we do is we talk about the needs of the Navy, what they're doing, best practices between shipyards across the country, how we can leverage that, and then we'll take those lessons learned and implement what we find out from there as well. But I'll say overall, certainly everybody has the challenges in building ships and supporting our nation's defense, but things have been very consistent to what you see on CDC. Ultimately, though, the last thing is just like our health officials are telling us, it's important for each one of us individually to follow the CDC recommendations, both at the workplace and at home, and that's something that we are challenged with, and that's something that we always got to remind ourselves, including me, to make sure that we continue to follow those guidelines. And that's pretty much, in a nutshell, what we've been doing here for quite a while now, better part of a month. Following CDC guidelines, and the CDC guidelines are close contact is less than 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. Some would even say it's a range. It could be 30 minutes or more, could be as low as 10 minutes or more. We've identified 15 minutes or more consistent contact for less than 6 feet. So yesterday what we did was that we didn't finish our investigation yesterday, quite frankly. So we sent people home just to get them, out of the space. We actually continued our investigation. We actually had one of my directors here call each one of those employees and went through to complete the investigation process. And basically it was just an easy question and answer process with our employee. Were you working within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes? And those that said yes, they stayed on quarantine, so we still have people on quarantine. Those that said no, we said, hey, you're not at risk, you can come back to work, or you're expected to come back to work, and they came back to work. So at the end of the day, we did send more people yesterday home as we were going through the process. We finished that process last night. Quite frankly, we have a few more people to go today, but there are people on quarantine that will stay on quarantine per CDC guidelines, and that is exactly what we communicated.
Okay. And he described that as well, saying, that he told you guys that, he hadn't had that long of contact with this said person. I think that his concerns more lied with the fact that not only, this virus isn't just transferred through, person-to-person contact, but also, materials and things like that. And he said this particular employee was someone that, was in contact with basically all the material in the shop.
Yeah. So, again, when we did our investigation, we also did an investigation of what PPE that person may or may not have handled, whether they were wearing gloves or not, and that was discussed with the employees. And I think overall, again, we're trying to be consistent with the CDC guidelines, and we actually know how long the virus is. It's communicated, on aluminum or something else. Aluminum's 2 hours, whatever the numbers are. So at the end of the day, we actually take that into account in our investigation. And bottom line is, any employee that wasn't comfortable with it, we addressed those issues or in whatever way that was, I think, mutually agreed to. And actually, I met with every one of those employees that came back to work this morning, and I had about a 30, 40-minute conversation with them. And we actually talked through some of the issues that we had, some of the discussions that we had yesterday, and I addressed any of their questions. I think that the meeting went very well, the discussion went very well, and quite frankly, we all went back to our work, and we're moving forward. So the one thing I've done since I've been here starting in 2007 is it's all about communication. And, we have all employee meetings, we open it up for questions, we have roundtable meetings, multiple of them a month, although we can't do it right now because of what's going on. And when I get questions, like I've had email questions from our employees, or I've had text questions from our employees, and I'll go out on the floor following CDC social distancing guidelines, and I'll address their questions personally. And I've been doing that from day one. I do it today, and I'm going to continue to do it going forward, because we're all in this together, quite frankly, and we're all having to deal with these challenges, and we're going to deal with it together. And that's our number one priority, is our health and well-being of our employees. And my number one priority is communicating with our employees, and I'm going to keep doing it. So I hope the feedback that you get from that meeting was, if you get it, was very good. And we're going to hit all these issues and questions head on. And it doesn't mean that we're not evolving either, because as the government just said about face coverings and stuff like that. So now we're evolving to deal with that, and we are. So at the end of the day, as things evolve. We meet on it every day, like clockwork, 7 days. Anything new that comes out, we address, we implement, and we move forward. We're a lean organization. We have quite a few people here, but at the end of the day, we're a pretty lean organization. So for things to happen, it doesn't take much to make something happen, and that's what we do, and that's what we're proud of, quite frankly.
Gotcha. So I guess kind of going back to the release that you guys gave us yesterday, and just the concerns that some of the, because it wasn't just one employee that reached out to me, it was multiple, that were kind of saying that you weren't being transparent in the release you guys gave to us because it didn't include the fact that not everyone was quarantined. So what would be kind of your response to that?
The only people that are quarantined are per CDC guidelines. If you worked within 6 feet of that person for 15 minutes or more, and that was determined in our investigation with the conversations with the employee, then we quarantine them. I mean, that's the way we did it. If there's anybody else that has a question, we certainly can raise that flag. But the employee, I got to be careful how much detail I give to the employee. The employee wasn't here for but just a few hours. So for one employee to have significant contact with a high number of employees is not possible, quite frankly. So we have a way of doing some of this too. We can take time charges. We can and everything we put out, we validate. So I know when people clock into the turnstiles, I know when they're on site or when they're not. So we had full disclosure with that employee plus the previous employee that we possibly can legally, and we communicated where they were and how long they were here. So at the end of the day, our focus is following the CDC guidelines and being consistent with that, and we're doing it.
Gotcha. I guess to kind of wrap things up, I think another point that I think we should bring up is that you guys, those people that are quarantined, you are paying them, and that those that I'm trying to make sure I word this correctly. The people that are still at work that say, hey, I don't feel comfortable being at work. You guys are letting them go home.
So we are letting them go home. We actually have an enhanced leave policy. And if they have specific circumstances that they need to address, then we have an enhanced leave policy in place. If we do have to direct somebody to go home because of a potential exposure here on the work site, then we are paying for those folks when they're home. And quite frankly, that's the right thing to do. We also have other benefits in place that we've enhanced to meet the needs of our employees the best we can. And I think, one thing that we're very well noted for is not only competitive wages, but a pretty healthy benefits package. And quite frankly, there are some options out there. But again, the expectation is we're open. We have to do all we can as a business to maintain the health and well-being of our employees. That's something that I take very, very seriously. As the folks that they know, I communicate on a daily basis. And then we've got to continue to work together as a team here at Austal and as a community to keep building ships for the Navy. Because the one thing we also can't do is impede or weaken our nation's defense. And that's kind of where we are. And the Secretary of the Navy made that clear, both the letter that he sent and with all defense contractors. I mean, at the end of the day, that's a focus as well. But I wouldn't ask anybody to do something I wouldn't do, that's for sure. And we are focused on maintaining and having the best workplace environment, as we always have, as you can see by all the awards we've received over multiple years in a row in our safety program. And we're doing all we can right now. We follow the guidelines of CDC for the definition of being exposed. And I'm not making that determination, quite frankly. We're letting the experts define that for us, quite frankly. We also, and we're following that, at the end of the day. So what we're doing is very consistent with those guidelines, plus it's consistent with other facilities across the country. And we're continuing to do our best to maintain a healthy environment for our employees. They do have options, but again, and they do have enhanced benefits to take advantage of as well. But listen, there's no doubt this is a concern for everybody. I mean, at the end of the day, this is kind of the world that we're living in right now. And all we can do is do the best we can, and what we are doing is do the best we can in the business to maintain the health and do all the things that we're expected to do and what we're going to do per the CDC guidelines. And then all of us as individuals need to also make sure we do what's responsible for us and each other and our families. And we got to make sure that we're focused on that as well. Bottom line is, though, I'll tell you this. The employees here have been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, at the end of the day, we're still doing what we need to do to complete our mission, which is building the best and coolest warships and surface ships for the U.S. Navy in the country, okay? And when I walk around, which I do very frequently these days, to again, open up for any conversations or questions to be asked, you can see the pride that our employees have. There's no doubt there's concerns, but there's an unbelievable amount of pride. And for that, for us, I think that's really a phenomenal thing to see. And despite the challenges that we see here, those are nothing as compared to what our healthcare officials and our first responders are seeing. And at the end of the day, the true heroes and the folks that are really have the risk in helping the community are those individuals. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate what they're doing for our community as well. So at the end of the day, I think, again, we're doing everything we can to maintain a healthy work environment, follow the CDC recommendations, and communicate with our employees. And we give opportunities for our employees to communicate back with us each and every single day. And then I go out personally and address any questions or comments they have. And with that, and continuing to work together both as a company and as a community, we're going to get through this, and we're all going to come out on top in the end.